Hello everyone. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at how you can create your own aircraft performance profiles inside of Littlenavmap. Now, I'm assuming that you have some experience with Littlenavmap at this particular point, and that you're kind of ready to go ahead and bring things in to make it a little more accurate for your flight planning purposes. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and design a flight plan that takes me out of South of Fourche, which is Kilo Golf Alpha Oscar. You're probably sitting there going, why on earth did you pick that airport? I thought you liked flying around New England. The reason is that it is at 0 feet above sea level, which means when we do our calculations, they'll be more precise. Next thing you know, what we want to do is we're going to go to the top where it says aircraft. We're going to click on new aircraft performance, and we're going to go ahead into aircraft, and we're going to go ahead and dial in all our different pieces here. So today we're going to be using, I'm actually going to be bouncing back and forth a little bit here. We're going to be using the Pipstrel Virus, which is a pretty neat little ultralight airplane, but it's a perfect example of how to use this for good, so to speak. So I'm going to go ahead and call it that, Pipstrel. It's a virus. It took me forever to realize it's virus, not virus. I've done that a few times. It's a PIVI is the aircraft type. Required runway, of course, if you get this out of the POH, is about 700 feet. You can use both. Now, under performance, this is the first thing we have to do here. We need to know what our fuel units are and what our fuel type is. So if I pop over here and click on my little weight and fuel here, I'll see that I can do gallons or pounds. Pounds are more precise. So I'm going to drag this all the way to the right and let go. It looks like a 79.24 times 2. A maximum fuel is going to be 159 pounds. So I'm going to come in here and do 159 pounds. Reserve fuel, this is totally up to you. Generally with reserve fuel, I usually do it as a percentage of the total fuel here. So if you imagine this aircraft cruises at 120 knots, you need at least 75 knots, or I should say, you need at least 45 minutes at nighttime. 45 minutes would be 75% of 120. I'll get myself a calculator. 75% of 120 is going to be 90. So I need the equivalent of 90. Of 90 for that particular purpose. So that gets me 90 in that, sorry. It gets me 90 nautical miles. So as long as I have enough fuel for 90 nautical miles, I'm good to go. If I had to guess real quickly off the top of my head, I'm just going to put in 10. A taxi fuel, this is a function of determining how long it takes you to actually taxi to a given airport. Everybody does this part differently. A lot of times what I recommend doing is heading to something like Atlanta or something along those lines, a little bit bigger of an airport, starting at a gate, picking the medium distance air runway and just sort of driving right up to it and calculating how long it takes. For us, it's about 5 pounds. Extra fuel, this is just if you need a little bit, if you need to add some because you're a little nervous about things. Obviously, if you're using a jet airliner, the extra fuel is going to be a pretty big value. For me, I just put 1 pound. Contingency fuel, of course, if you're an airliner, this is going to be really critical. Your airline is going to tell you how much you need. 5% for me is considered kind of minimum. You can go as high as, I've seen people do 10%. Generally, anything past that seems like it's getting a little redundant. Now for the tricky part. All this stuff we know nothing about, but I've got great news. The flight simulator can actually calculate these elements for you. So I'm going to come down here and press the OK button. I'm going to press Save. And now we have ourselves the Pivi. So now I'm sitting here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fly a flight for the express purposes of having the computer calculate the performance dynamically. Now, if you're wondering how I connect it up to the flight simulator, you can actually go up here and make it connect to the flight. I'm sorry, that's the data itself. Where's my connections option? There we go. There's an option here that actually lets you go ahead and connect directly to the flight simulator, and it will do this all automatically for you. You can also make it connect automatically. You can also disconnect if you're doing some special work. The important thing here is whatever you choose to use, remember, you're starting at 0, and you can see that very clearly at this side. All right, so let's go back to the flight simulator. I'm going to have to go ahead and fly this aircraft carefully, but I'm going to have to control my scenario a bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to weather. I'm going to go ahead and change this to clear skies. I'm also going to change the time of day. I usually do 12 o'clock. Seems to be a nice, fair average. That way things aren't vary too much. And of course, I'm going to come down here where I have all my temperature. I'm going to make sure my temperature says 15 degrees Celsius. That's very, very important. Now, the reason we need this to be 15 is because all of our performance is going to be based off of that. Pressure, of course, you want standard, which is going to be 1013 and a quarter. Go to your wind and go ahead and disable the wind. Now, this is one of the most rare days in aviation where there's literally no wind at all. This is wonderful for us. I'm also going to go up to settings. I'm just going to confirm that everything looks okay to me. I've got some clouds, but they do not impact me because there's no coverage. So right now, I have a raw aircraft. The temperature is exactly standard. The aircraft is exactly normal. Everything's been preset, ready to rock. Again, I don't have to do too much here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my mouse to the top, and I'm going to go ahead and set my fuel maxed out one more time. And I'm also going to max out my payload. You always want to assume worst case scenario whenever you're doing anything along those lines. Okay, so now here comes the fun part. What we're going to do is we're going to take off and we're going to go ahead and climb upwards until we get to a specific destination. Let's go up to my flight plan here. 11,000 feet is a little extreme. Usually I tell people to climb up. If you're a propeller aircraft with no turbocharger, 8,000 feet is considered the max. If you're a propeller aircraft with a turbocharger, I usually recommend 16,000 feet. For those of you who are on turboprops, usually I recommend 21,000 feet. If you're an airliner, 36,000 feet. You have to climb up to that altitude in order for it to find the average climb speed. That's really important. So I'm going to go ahead and set this to 8,000 feet. We're going to switch this to VFR. Again, it won't do any damage to my flight plan here. Okay, so we're going to climb this way, and we're going to go ahead and get to this particular position. We're going to go ahead and take a left, and then we're going to cruise for a little while, set our aircraft up to cruise, come around, and then descend using our standard technique. I know that seems a little bit redundant, but it actually works pretty well. All right, let's take ourselves over to the flight simulator. Make sure our parking brake is in the off position. It'd be pretty silly if I left it on. It won't be the 600th time I've done it. All right, make sure the parking brake is disengaged. All right, let's do it. So now you're going to take off using whatever your standard technique is. So remember, there is no wind in the universe right now. So anything that goes wrong is completely the pilot's fault here. So I'm going to go ahead and now get ourselves up to speed here, about 50 knots. I'm going to lift the nose up. This Virus, by the way, is actually a really nice airplane. I'm going to go ahead and get this thing airborne here. And again, I recommend using the autopilot whenever you can for this process so that you have the most efficient control of your aircraft. I'm going to go ahead and pull myself up like that. Again, now that we're starting to climb, I want to establish my climbing speed. In the Virus, you're going to be doing about 75 knots. So that's actually going to lift the nose up just a tiny bit more. Obviously, keep in mind, if we pick a direction that is not in the direction we're traveling in, any turning we do is going to impact our climb speed. So any turns you do choose to maintain, you want to keep them as smooth as butter, because that's the only way you're going to get reliable values. Remember, as I'm talking to you, these values are actually being recorded inside of the flight simulator so that we can go ahead and analyze them later on. It's really, really, really important that you do everything as carefully and precisely as you can to go ahead and guarantee that. I'm actually going to flip on the flight director, flip on the automatic pilot. I'm going to increase my vertical speed just a tiny bit. We're actually going to go to IS mode. And we want a selected airspeed of 75 knots. Delightful. We haven't actually selected an altitude yet, but I'm not worried about that too much. Oop. Go ahead and set myself an upper altitude. Yeah, I'm actually going to take manual control. I'm not thrilled with the way this is behaving. Again, this is going to damage our average, and if this happens to you, you're going to have to go back and start over. But you'll find as you climb, usually things balance themselves out fairly well, so I wouldn't panic too much. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and turn the automatic, make sure IS is off. Everybody should be turned off. Let's go actually turn vertical speed on. And we'll get ourselves doing 1,000 feet per minute. Should be plenty. Again, we're just trying to find the exact magical speed where it starts climbing itself up nice and evenly. This takes a little bit of shenanigans. All right, climb ourselves up a little bit steeper. Already, I've absolutely spoiled this. If you're doing this at home, if I were you, I would have completely restarted until you got everything perfectly balanced again. Again, the more reliable of a pilot you are, which I am not being at the moment, the more accurate your experience is going to be. Keep in mind, by the way, this aircraft is not designed to be climbed at 5,500 RPM or 5,800 RPM. It's actually designed to be climbed at 5,500. So that is another factor for whatever particular airplane you are. Use whatever the book says as far as what you should be doing in order to get the aircraft to climb upwards. There we go. That's much better. Okay, now we're at 75. We're climbing up super happily now. Everything is set. My vertical speed is happy. I've finally gotten this plane to behave the way that I wanted it to behave. This is great news. All right, let's go take a look over here, and you'll notice that the data is starting to come in. We're getting average performance climb. See how this says true airspeed is 89 knots? That's actually not accurate. The reason that number is so darn high is, if you remember, it's because we had such a difficult time getting the autopilot under control right away. And again, that's my bad, not your bad. So a lot of times what you can do is you can actually average this data out. So I'm actually going to see this button up here where it says merge. I'm going to press that right now. And it's going to allow you to take the information that is collected and load it into everything so far. So I'm actually going to go ahead and do copy for this. Do copy for this. We're going to say that's good. We don't know any of this information yet. We don't know any of this information yet. I'm going to ignore it. I'm going to ignore it. Again, we don't know any of this information yet. Notice we can capture taxi fuel if we wanted to capture it. So average climb speed, I'm going to press the OK button, and now we're starting to build a performance profile for this aircraft. Now in a few moments, when we do get up to our cruise altitude of 8,000 feet, that's going to be the moment when I go ahead and merge that data one more time. You can see how we're starting to get a little under 75. I'm going to bring the nose down a little bit. Again, we're trying to keep that pretty accurate. In the real world, when you're climbing, you're actually working off of TAS, not IS, but obviously we have to work with what we have here. And this is going to be more than enough information as far as getting a very, very precise measurement. I know some of you are going, hey, can't you just give us these performance files? I think it's important you understand how to make your own, because what's going to happen is when new aircraft start coming out of payware or something along those lines, you're going to be like, hey, I really want to fly such and such airplane. You know, the Whiz-Bang 6 is what my flight instructor always would call it. It's going to be worthwhile to be able to do your own. Plus, you might actually find that you want to design your own performance profile, because maybe you fly the aircraft differently than the way other people fly their aircraft. And that could actually cause a pretty performance drastic change. All right, taking a look over on this side, I can see I'm just kind of cruising. Notice it updates the position dynamically. It looks like our average speed is cruising down. Our vertical speed average is coming down. Our fuel flow has not changed, which is wonderful news. As a matter of fact, I'm actually going to lean out my mixture a teeny tiny bit. This is a FADEC engine, so I don't have to worry about leaning it, but keep in mind, you are responsible to fly the aircraft based on how this aircraft is designed to be flown. So if they tell you to lean the mixture all the time, you got to do that. If they tell you to fly at the speed, you got to do all that. The more accurately you do this, the more precise your final performance will actually be. And again, you'll see how wonderful this is in a minute. I'll go lift that nose up just a tiny bit. And we're doing pretty good. We're holding it at 75 knots. Again, 8,000 feet seems extreme, but it's actually not that extreme. And the reason it's not that extreme is most propeller aircraft perform best between 7,000 and 8,000 feet. So as long as you can get them up to that speed, you'll find that they actually behave very, very nicely. I'm going to lift the nose up just a teeny tiny bit. Yeah, we're averaging about 950 feet per minute, which have actually come back over here real quick. You'll notice that some average speed is about 1,000 total. And we're averaging, the fuel flow is actually coming down a little bit. Obviously, as you climb higher, you're going to get a little bit less fuel flow. So that is going to be impacted in your performance there. Yeah, this is awfully high for viewers. I feel kind of bad here because this would be definitely an interesting flight for us. Normally with aircraft this large, you're usually flying at altitudes of 2,000 or 3,000 feet tops. You never go to 6,000 or 7,000 feet. It's not to say we can't do 6,000 or 7,000 feet. It's just to say it's just not very common. Now the interesting thing is my oil temperature is actually yellowing out right now, indicating that things are starting to get very hot. My gas temperature is fine. My fuel pressure is fine. I'm not really worried about that at all. So we're just gently climbing up here. Decrease my vertical speed a little bit. I can see I'm starting to get on the wrong side of 75. Professionals, by the way, will point out the fact that as you climb, you're still going to be using TAS and not IS. So this number here should be 75 and not this number here. I do notice there's a difference, but I'm trying to provide you with something that's actually relatively easy. All right, let's get to the top of this climb. All right, we're hitting the top of the climb now. That's 8,000 feet. All right, let's go head over back to our little nav map. Whoop. Now, before we do that, though, we have to actually level the aircraft off. There he goes. Excellent. All right, let's pop back over here. So now we have the last bit of our performance for our climb here. And you can see it's automatically calculating its cruise performance. We haven't actually gotten up to cruise speed. I'm going to go back to the merge data where it says this information. I'm going to ignore everything except I'm going to merge all of my cruise data. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to press the OK button. And now we have very, very accurate climb performance. Let me just confirm that it did that accurately. Yeah, it looks pretty good. It looks like, again, my true airspeed was a little high. Let's go ahead and set this aircraft up for cruise. At 8,000 feet, we cruise wide open throttle and 5,000 RPM. So we'll go ahead, wide open throttle has already been set. I'm going to go ahead and bring my RPM down to about 5,000. Again, I'm using the world's most sensitive control for the purposes of setting RPM here. It looks pretty good. I'm not, oop, apparently I touched it too aggressively. The real one, by the way, is just this irritating. I'm literally not even touching it. It's just going, whoa, whoa, whoa. Okay, I'm just going to let you figure yourself out. Okay, cool. I'm going to go ahead and set my cruise flaps. So this aircraft has unique flaps. I'm actually going to push this into the down position. That's going to get us into our cruise flaps, which again, it's just going to change our lift to drag ratio. So now I'm just going to let the aircraft stabilize. So again, we're going to get our certain altitude. We're a little high, but that's not going to affect things nearly as bad as it could. RPM is eventually going to settle at 5,000. I don't know what the deal with that is. But now if we pop over here, you'll notice under average performance climb, it has a true airspeed, and you'll also notice that it has, a fuel flow, in which case it's 32 pounds per hour, 5 gallons at 112 knots. So now if I go to the merge option, I'll click ignore again, and I'll go ahead and grab that information right out of the program. So let's go ahead and copy that, press OK. And now we have cruise data located inside of our aircraft. So again, whatever you choose to set your cruise speed to is what ultimately you're going to end up being for cruise data. Like I'm taking a look right now and I'm noticing my TAS is actually quite a bit higher than what they indicated over there. Remember, it took us time to accelerate to our cruise speed. So I might actually want to go in and edit it so that our TAS is indicating 117.5. So to do that, I can go up to aircraft. I can go ahead and do my merge again if I want to, in which case this is 113. That still seems a little low. I can go to aircraft, edit aircraft performance, come down here to where it has my typical cruise, and I can just set this up to 117. I'll go ahead and press the OK button, and just like that, my aircraft is now configured for its cruise flight. I notice my fuel flow is still a little tiny bit high there. Let's go back to edit aircraft performance. It's probably going to be a little bit closer to 30 pounds per hour. 30, and that looks good, that looks good. I'm going to press the OK button. And that's all you have to do in order to go ahead and establish both your cruise speed as well as your climb speed. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go fast forward to our descent so that we can calculate our descent performance. All right, we're just about hitting our top of descent. Now it's time to go ahead and calculate our descent performance. Now there's 100 different ways to descend an airplane. Obviously, you just push the nose down and go. That's usually a little bit more dangerous. Generally, what you want to do if you're in general aviation is get yourself at about 500 feet per minute downward without exceeding into your yellow zone, your VNO here. So I'm going to go ahead and press the vertical speed button. I'm going to press down, 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 down. And we're just going to get ourselves at 500 feet per minute. 700, and we're just going to play with the throttle until we can get this aircraft comfortably not past the little top of the green arc. This is a tremendously aggressive descent, but it is actually a very effective descent as well. You know, it's going to get us going down pretty darn quick here. Go ahead and take a look over on our nav map, and you can see that it's going to start recognizing our hop of descent, and it's actually going to notice exactly what our descent profile is. Now, if we're not sure, of course, we can always go in here. We can always kind of double check that information ourselves. So I'm going to go ahead and now slow ourselves down just a teeny bit here. And it looks like our top of descent data is starting to come in right now. You can see my true airspeed is about 130 knots, which isn't quite accurate because of the fact, again, this is TAS versus IS. This is indicated, or more, it's going to be a little bit closer to 120 is what I would expect. My fuel flow on the flip side, you can see this very, very dynamically. You know, we're going to take a look at the other program in a second for that. Okay, so let's go ahead and start dialing some of these details. See how it's starting to dial in now? So our fuel flow for this is actually almost exactly the same as it was for cruise, which actually is not a surprise. You'll notice our vertical speed is about 500 feet per minute. And you'll notice our TAS is about 130 knots. Now, you're probably sitting here going, isn't that all we need to know? It's like, remember, we need to know about the entire descent, not just about the top of descent. Now, some of you are also saying, now, is there anything stopping you from just pushing the nose over and going? In the real world, it's called, you know, the inner ear. It gets very, very grumpy when you apply such extreme pressure changes to it. But again, you got to do what's going to work for you in a given situation. So I'm just taking a look real quickly. I've got a pretty good descent. I'm starting to get some data. I'll go ahead and send that data in now. I'll ignore everybody. I'll grab my descent speed, go ahead and do merge. Actually, I'm going to do copy, my bad. Press the OK key, and now if I take a look at my edit aircraft performance, I can see that I have a fairly good layout of this aircraft. The last thing I like to do is when we go down to alternate, you can use a different speed here, but honestly, I would just copy paste it right after fuel flow for cruise. Press OK there. Very important. I'm going to press Save Aircraft Performance. Don't not do that, because if you do, you lose all your hard work here. And this is what you end up as far as your final work goes. I think this value is actually wrong. You know, I think this is going to be much closer to 75 knots. I'm actually going to update that. My vertical speed here is about 1,058. Ended up being the average. Remember, this is going to be a little bit funky. We're just going to go ahead and assume 1,000 feet per minute. Again, you can clean this up. Fuel flow, I believe, is actually accurate. Cruise, I believe that's actually fairly accurate. Fuel flow, that's accurate. Descent speed, it says 131. It's going to get a little bit closer to 120, but again, we want to complete our descent here to see what that actually works out to be. So let's go ahead and take a look. I'm going to go ahead and resave my data one more time. And again, you can see where I've gotten all these numbers. I'll see you at the bottom of the climb. All right, we're just about hitting the bottom of our descent, not our top of climb. Of course I have it. Here is our destination airport, which we're just cruising right over the top right now. I'm going to go ahead and pause. We're going to go spin ourselves back over to this and take a look at our final numbers. So its descent, it still says it's turned out to be 130 knots, which again, because of our high altitude, that is about 130 knots TAS. Our vertical speed was 500 feet per minute. Our fuel flow is accurate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the merge button. I'm going to go ahead and ignore everything, but I'm just going to merge my information as far as my descent data goes. Click on merge. I already taken care of that. Press OK. And now we have our finished aircraft performance project. Total time on this is a little less than half an hour. And again, if you want to steal my values right off of this, feel free to knock yourself out because, again, these values are all fairly accurate. I'm just going to kind of clean some of them up. The fuel flow, everything is wonderfully calculated. I'll go ahead and press File. I'll go ahead and press Save. Now, usually what I recommend doing, and this is a really, really, really good tip, is to make yourself a new flight plan and test to see whether or not the values are what you expected them to be. So, for example, we'll kind of stay down here in Louisiana. Why not, right? So we'll go ahead and take ourselves, we'll go ahead and start where we were here. Take myself right here, right-click on that, and I'm going to go ahead and say this is my departure point. I'm going to go ahead and take us all the way up to, let's give this thing a pretty nice little exercise here. Hardy, what sounds like a pretty good spot. So I was hoping for an airport that's a little bit more to do here rather than something like that. We'll do downtown Mobile. I think that sounds like a good idea to me. Go ahead and right-click on that sucker. Go ahead and add, ooh, apparently I missed it just a little bit there. And that's the one I want, right? No, still does not want to give it to me. I want the circle. Give me the circle. Destination. There we go. So now I'll go ahead and tweak my little plan. Notice, by the way, since I have it pre-selected, it already recognizes the fact that everything's already ready to rock on this particular one. My top of climb should come at 10 nautical miles. My top of descent should come at 35 nautical miles from the destination. And we can dial in our cruise altitude. I don't think I need to cruise nearly that high. For a VFR, I should say, yeah, VFR flight, I'll do 5,500 feet. I think that's fair. And we'll go ahead and test it and see just how close we should go. Now, the neat thing is if I come over here to where it says fuel remaining, it can say exactly how much fuel it expects us to consume here in order to actually take our thing. First, it says the flight's going to take an hour and 9 minutes. It also says if we start at 48 pounds, we should end at 13 pounds. Now, let me go to my aircraft performance real quick. I find that kind of a little interesting. Usable fuel, yeah, it looks pretty good. Press OK. Everything looks fine there. So now it's just a matter of trying it out and seeing just how close our total fuel usage and our total time actually comes out to be. Let's see what happens. All right, we just hit our top of descent. Woo, boy, that was a lot longer flight than I probably had anticipated. Let's go ahead and get this thing going down. So I'm going to shut off the altitude hold mode. I'm going to go ahead and press the vertical speed mode. Go ahead and nudge the thing down. Again, we agreed on 500 feet per minute to be our vertical speed. So I'm going to go ahead and set that. 500, and we also agreed that we were going to descend at pretty much right on the end of the yellow line there. So let's go ahead and spin that speed up. So we're basically going to be flying ourselves in a pretty standard approach here. Nothing too crazy. Let's take a look at our fuel consumption so far. It looks like we've burnt, it's a substantial amount of fuel. I've actually sucked almost 3/4 of the total fuel out of the left-hand side. We'll do our final fuel calculations once we finally do get this thing down onto the ground. Let's head over. All right, let's go ahead and bring ourselves into a traffic pattern and then do our last couple calculations. I get the feeling our cruise fuel calculation is going to be a bit off. I noticed after the last patch that came out of Microsoft, I think this is early March 8th, something like that, that the stutters around major cities have definitely returned. You know, I wasn't having much of an issue with that recently, but unfortunately it seems like it certainly has. So once we sit this thing down on the ground, we're going to go ahead and hold on the brakes, and then we're going to go ahead and stop it, check what our final fuel actually ended up being, hit that with the calculator, compare that to what our program said, and then make some gentle adjustments to the cruise fuel. Again, this is a bit of a recursive process, and everybody's going to be a little different. One thing I actually saw one person did that I thought was way more clever than I was to actually set it up so there are multiple cruise performances. So basically you'd have, you know, Pipstrel Virus for 8,000 feet, Pipstrel Virus for 7,000 feet. So you have a more accurate measurement of the different performances that you can expect during a different wide range of different types of altitudes. Now that is definitely the superior method, but again, for what we're doing today, I'm not going to be worrying about that too much here. The only thing I'm going to be worrying about is, you know, not stalling the plane and crashing. Now, one thing I just noticed is there's a big old X right there at the end of the runway, which means that runway cannot be used, but it's too bad because I can't read. I'm illiterate, so I'm not going to worry about it too much here. That big X certainly isn't something I understand at all. I'm not going to ignore it. No, I can't tell me what to do. All right, let's go ahead and get this thing coming down. So I'm going to go ahead and drop in my regular flaps. Drop in my next notch of regular flaps. I'm going to go ahead and line myself up with the little bunny there. That's that little white line. And yeah, I can definitely feel the stutters. They have returned. Now, the interesting thing I've discovered is once you touch the ground, for some reason or another, the stuttering mysteriously stops, which I kind of want to know what exactly is going on, Microsoft. I know it's something you folks have changed, and I'd be very curious what you changed it to, because like I said, this was not an issue in the previous version. Woo, boy, are we high. Yikes. It's all right. I'm landing on something I'm not supposed to be landing on anyway. This thing, I'm going a bit on the fast side. Again, our stall speed is 48 knots, which makes our approach speed quite a bit higher than this. Probably not higher than this, just a little bit lower. 63, 65, something like that. Again, the purpose was measuring performance, not finding the appropriate place to land. Start bringing in a little bit of thrust, make sure everything's ready, do my gumps checks, we're good to go. Gonna land on that big, gigantic yellow X. Yeah, so sue me. Actually, we're gonna land short of that yellow X if I'm not careful. Gunk. We're here. All right, bring the aircraft to a complete stop. Brakes. Nice, we're here. Alrighty then. Okay, so originally we estimated that we need to be burning, let's see here. I should have 13 pounds of fuel remaining. Again, this would have been in gallons. 48 minus 13, let's just do the math real quick. 48 minus 13, that's going to get us a total of 35 pounds is expected burn. Total time was 1 hour and 9 minutes. Let's go ahead and take a look what time it is. 1 hour and 9 minutes. It is now 2:12, so it was 1 hour and 12 minutes. So it actually took a little bit longer, which means our cruise speed is a little too high. So I'm just going to reduce that by a single knot. So I'm going to go up here. Our cruise speed of 117 is probably a little bit closer to 116. All right, so our fuel, as you guys just remember, is 35 pounds. Let's see how we did. 35 pounds. Don't forget 35 pounds. So do 0.79 multiplied by our maximum fuel on board, which we determined to be 159. We want this number to be as close to 35 as possible. 33.39. Interesting. So our total flight here was 2 minutes longer. However, our total flight was also used less fuel than we expected. So to fix that, I'm going to go over to here. I'm going to change my cruise fuel. I'm just going to reduce it by 1 to 29 pounds per hour. Press OK. Go ahead, aircraft, save performance, and I am done. So now we have a complete, ready-to-rock performance profile for this particular aircraft. You can do that for any aircraft. It doesn't matter if it's payware, it doesn't matter if it's a helicopter, and it doesn't matter if, well, a glider is probably going to give you issues. But the nice thing is, because we took all this time and all this effort to get this all programmed in here, we can now automatically calculate our top of climbs and top of descents, as well as expected things like, how long our flight is actually going to take. And you can even do things like dial in the wind and everything else like that. All right, hopefully this video was helpful. Next time, we'll take a look at slightly more advanced topic, but nothing too extreme. Enjoy.